My name is Katie Proctor, and I own Books with Pictures in Portland, Oregon. Before I started Books with Pictures, I had a whole lot of different jobs. I worked as a tech consultant. I briefly ran a literary magazine. I was a graduate student in science and technology studies. And before that, spent some time soldering circuit boards and reading books on tape. There was a particular day, we were in the midst of sort of round one of Gamergate. And so there were a lot of men on the internet being very, very angry about what nerd spaces women should or should not inhabit. And I was a comic book fan. I'd also grown up playing tabletop role-playing games, which is also a space where women are often not very welcome. I'd also worked in a bookstore, and so I was having a lot of very intense feelings about the ways that women's presence in nerd spaces was being policed and talked about. And in particular, that an excuse that was often given for not making better representation in comic books of women and queer folks and people of color was because all of the owners of comic shops were old white men, and comic shops, because of the way the market works, are the ultimate buyers of comic books. Nobody tracks sell-through. They only track comic shop sales. And so if the owners of comic shops won't buy a book, then a comic publisher has no motivation to make it. That was the sort of standing argument for a long time about diversity in comics. And so my angry response to that at that moment was, well, then I just need to own a comic shop then, and I'll show them. And I, at that time, started like sketching logos, right? But there was a longer window between that and actually like giving it a proper name and writing a business plan and figuring out that I could actually just, spend my life savings and buy comic books and open a comic book store, which I did about 3.5 years ago. My sort of driving principle is that the typical comic nerd demographic of sort of straight, cis, white, able-bodied dudes are going to find themselves comfortable in pretty much any comic book space. It would be actually hard to design a space that felt exclusive to them. But there are a whole lot of people outside of that demographic who have a history of feeling excluded and marginalized by comic spaces. And so my objective was to design a space that felt explicitly inclusive to those folks. Beyond that, really making sure that the books that are being highlighted, that the posters that are on the walls are fundamentally inclusive, that there's always women, that there's always people of color, that we do the best we can to stock any new mainstream book that has queer representation, and lots of not mainstream books that have that kind of representation. That when you look around the space, you are more likely to see yourself reflected back in the creators and their creations. We got to host a reading celebrating a creator named Archie Bongiovanni and their book Genderqueer, which is a sort of coming out memoir about figuring out that they're non-binary and also that they're asexual. It's a incredibly moving book. It is very, very personal. It definitely takes some rough roads around sexual assault and other things, but it's a beautiful, beautiful book. Everyone I know who picked it up at the store, like, specifically came back to talk to me about it. It was a packed house, standing room all through the shop, even sort of around the edges and ends of things. And one of the things that Archie talked about was that, so Archie's a CalArts grad, I think that's right, and had done a memoir writing class with another creator I love named Mara Naomi, and in that class had said, this is the things I do for this class are the only memoir I'm ever going to do. This is too personal. I don't like it. I don't like telling people about myself. And then realized later that as someone who had this marginalized identity of being trans, but was otherwise white and safely housed and had enough money to eat and sustain themselves, that they actually had a lot of privilege that a lot of trans folks didn't have. And so it came to feel, and I'm paraphrasing and I don't want to get them wrong, but that it came to feel important to use that privilege to tell their story, to get these specific trans narratives out into the world as a person for whom they were unlikely to lose their housing or to lose their job or to otherwise suffer repercussions that lots of trans folks suffer every day. And I loved that piece of Archie's story because it's really close to my heart. One of the driving principles for me as I've worked to create a space that's safe and welcoming and inclusive, is to really try to be super aware of where my privileges are, where my unique advantages are, and leverage those into making something for my community. And there's a sort of ethical piece that I think, like Archie in autobio class, of I don't want to share that much of myself, but really it feels personal. It feels uncomfortable. I think I've come to believe that downplaying your strengths and your talents and your advantages and your privilege is a way of reducing the amount of good you can do in the world. That you have to recognize the advantages that you have to use them in order to do more good. And so that inner voice that says nasty things about you, which mine does loudly all the time, is actually in some ways a genuinely immoral voice, because it makes you be less. The X-Men right now, it is the thing I break open the box for every week. I am so thrilled about this book. Jonathan Hickman is he's a writer. He writes big, weird, Easter egg laden stories. He wrote one of my favorite runs on the Avengers ever, and has now taken over the X-Men and there's a Poison Ivy Harley Quinn romance book that just started a couple weeks ago that is incredibly sweet and revolves on the question of what happens to your relationship when your girlfriend dies and then comes back from a little tiny flower. We recently moved, and one of the best things about the move is that I got to make a sort of more enclosed kids section. So it's a little bit set off from the rest of the store. So when kids come in, they can sort of duck in there and cocoon and explore in a way that's sort of safe and full of books that I think they should be reading. Their parents may disagree, but anyway, having a good sort of cozy all ages section is important. And we're also across the street from an elementary school. So we get an after school rush almost every day, which is great, of kids who want to come in and read, and sometimes they buy stuff, sometimes they don't, but it's amazing to be that kind of nurturing space for our local kids and teenagers, and we do some events for kids, but I feel like in a lot of ways it's just as important to just be here reliably every day and be welcoming. We definitely oppose bullying in our space, and burning the planet down is a thing that we are in general opposed to. While we try not to make fun of people for their physical traits, like their tiny fingers, which are so very small, we do definitely encourage empowering women and girls, and so yeah, I mean, that sounds fun.